retweet it and then I'll send it to the other people.
Yeah, exactly. It's live now, so if you hit links, and then just yeah,
Links.
YouTube page. You see bottom right corner where our pictures are popping up on the bottom, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. You see the thing that says viewers and links?
No, I don't have that, dude.
Really? Do you not have Lost in the Wild episode 2 in like the bottom right corner of this
Nope.
of the window? Okay.
Negative.
All right,
We
well
can
I
worry
do.
about that later.
Yeah. Um yeah, I'll just tweet it out and then you can do the same thing.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right, man, good to go.
Do it, man.
All right. And welcome back to the Lost in the Wild podcast episode 2. This is our second go around at this old merry-go-round, if my wordplay was effective there. Declan Goff here with my brother, of course, Liam Goff. Liam, how's it going?
It's going well. Going well. Ready, excited for another journey
Yes,
down this road.
you are. They're all there. Everyone is lost in the wild with us. As ironic as this podcast is named.
Some more than others.
Exactly. Everyone from fans to players to coaches to media, everyone is a little bit lost in the wild right now. A lengthy All-Star break, obviously 7 days off. It was I guess, entertaining All-Star game, you could say. There was definitely a lot of storylines, but now back to the real world, the actual hockey world, and not John Scott scoring 2 goals a game and being an MVP. Not that he didn't earn it, but now we're back to a real hockey world, and Minnesota Wild 3 games this week, and all on the road, and most importantly, all against playoff teams. Now they had the roughest month in recent memory in January. I'm guessing, the feeling, at least my feeling is for right now is, all right, January happened. We had a week off, and now we were able to rest, get ready to go. Dubnik was the only one that was really at the All-Star game. Do you think this lengthy rest will hopefully wake something up, or is it still going to be a slow crawl to get the Wild back to consistency?
It's always hard to tell with these all-star breaks. Guys kind of get to recharge their batteries. Marco Scandella and Nino Niederreiter and Matt Dumba went golfing. Other guys went out with their families. Dubnik obviously represented us in the All-Star game. You know, it's tough to get a judge yet. It's hard to gauge how your team is going to react when they weren't allowed to have official functions until 2 o'clock, I think, Central Time today. And I'm optimistic, but I did hear through the Twitterverse that there was a little scuffle today at Wild practice.
A scuffle, you say?
Yeah, Matt Dumba and Mikko Koivu were in a battle drill, and things got a little testy there, a little shoving match. Mikko Koivu said, it's kind of just what happens. It was a battle drill. Guys were battling, but I hope that's maybe that's the captain's way of lighting a fire under the rear end of the other players and kind of just letting them know that it's time to wake up. Hopefully.
It's always refreshing too when you hear it from your captain, especially a guy like Mikko Koivu. I know everyone just when they see a C on a sweater here in Minnesota, they assume it's supposed to mean goals and big playoff wins, and all this just unobtainable stuff for any player, let alone Mikko Koivu. And it's nice when you see a guy like that is your captain that kind of wrestles around one of the young bucks that's for the better part had a pretty disappointing sophomore season and put his arm around him basically and would give him some tough love because like you said, you said it exactly right. They got to wake up. And with having a week off and literally not even able to come together, is it me, and not to go off on a tangent here, but is the NHL CBA like regulations the most like strictest of any of the 4 major sports? Like you can't even go out to, I'm even surprised, those Marco Scandella and I think you said Jared Spurgeon, whoever it was, they all went out golfing.
Nino Niederreiter
Oh,
and
Nino was okay.
Yeah.
So I'm even surprised they're even allowed to hang out with each other outside of a team unorganized event, even though it's has nothing to do with the sport. I mean, it's such a strict regulation the CBA has in store.
Well, first off, let me just say I enjoy your tangents. I don't think
Yeah,
you should hide them.
I love my tangents.
I do too. Um, I think it's pretty strict. It might not be it it's definitely very owner controlled. I mean, as we know, 2 lockouts in 10 years is kind of
Sure.
evidence of that. But, I think it's good. The NHL has a lot of things that kind of help guys recharge their batteries. They have the holiday freeze, which I think is important. And that's something that I think can work in our favor. Maybe guys just need to get away from each other. Everyone's kind of gripping their stick a little tight. No one can score, and maybe they just needed to let their frustrations out elsewhere and come back together and hopefully go on a nice run here and get us into a decent playoff position.
Absolutely. And they're going to have to do it against, like we said earlier in the podcast, playoff teams. And it's going to be tough. The East Coast, or a nice little road trip to start it off. And hey, the Wild have, let's be honest, not been, even though they haven't been very good, they've been exceptionally worse at home, it seems, which is very uncharacteristic of them. And hey, if you want to turn things around, I think there's no better place to do it than away from your building and pick up steam for the next homestand.
Well, it might, almost relieve the pressure, like you said, we didn't do too well at home. I think 3 wins in our past, what is it, 12 games
Yeah,
there.
something
And
like that.
and it might just be nice to go somewhere else and, not have to worry about the home crowd booing you when your power play performs at a 10% clip. Andrew Burnett, you know, diss inserted here. But it could work in our favor. Islanders are no slouch. They're a good squad. I was very interested to hear about the Christian Folin call up, though.
Yes, that is interesting news because
They've been cycling. They've been cycling these defensemen in. Tyson Strachan, is that Tyson Strachan?
yep,
Strachan.
yep.
And Mike Riley and Foley, they're getting all these guys reps, and it's no secret that we're dangling these D men out here. So they're bringing up Foley at a time when we kind of need to get on a stretch run. So if you're bringing up a guy who doesn't have a lot of time up in the pros this season, maybe it's a sign that something's in the works, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the trade deadline obviously is it's not like a traditional or excuse me, not even traditional sport. The trade deadline is no this just disregard everything I just said. Trade deadline is nowhere it's not on the horizon quite yet, but it's definitely coming up, and hopefully the Wild can find someone maybe to spark the team, but we've kind of at least I think have made the point that at least in the first episode, and that was a whole week ago, and that's about a month in Minnesota sports lore. We believe the thing to fix the Wild is internal. There's no real huge risk unless it's. I mean, if you're gonna get a dynamite player, get it. But taking a risk maybe on a Jonathan Drouin, I don't see a suitor in that for the Wild. I don't think that's just gonna work out for them if they took a risk on someone like Drouin.
Yeah, I don't want anything. I've talked about it. I don't want anything to do with Jonathan Drouin. But hey,
So,
whatever.
sounds like Steve Yzerman is too. He's down like he's ready to
Yeah,
absolutely neck.
yeah. I don't think. I think Steve Yzerman, Steve Stamkos, anyone named Steve doesn't want anything to do with Jonathan Drouin. I think it's kind of obvious. But he's gonna move. I mean, you can't have that lingering over your head, especially a team like Tampa Bay, who's they're built to win now. And I don't know if you've been paying attention, but apparently there's some sort of contract drama with Steven Stamkos.
Oh
and,
yeah, oh yeah. That
and
the Stamkos rumors. Not to cut you off,
no, you're fine.
is going to be fun to watch. Whether he does get moved, and obviously if he does not, where the heck he's going to go? He's claimed he would like to play for Original 16. I don't know. I'm excited to see
From
how it plays out
Toronto.
because
From Toronto. I don't know. It'd
that
be
yeah, there's a
interesting.
suitor there. Yeah,
He's a
that very well
suitor.
could happen.
Yeah.
Well, you were bringing up though Christian Folin getting back up to the Wild, back to the Minnesota Wild. You brought up that Christian Folin was coming up from the minors and has been called up. I'm okay with that. I know they keep cycling back, and I'm sure by the end of Wednesday a new one will be called up. But Christian Folin, I'd rather have him come up and honestly miss time. I know that's kind of an oxymoron, but I'm a big fan of Mike Riley, and Riley needs as much minutes as you can. And I would love for him to eventually make the jump and be with the NHL team permanently. Obviously, the Wild have a log jam with defensemen, but Christian Folin to some is this maybe hidden jewel in the rough. And I mean, he's a third pairing defenseman. That's his
Yeah.
ceiling. He's not.
Oh
He's
yeah.
not. He's never. I'm sorry to break it to you. He's never going to be this top four defenseman. If he was, I think it would have been very clear in his game that he's produced that. And he's played sparingly. He hasn't played awful, but he certainly hasn't showed, I think, anyone anything, at least at the NHL level, that says, oh, wow, this guy has potential to be a top four, 15 to 20-minute type of night kind of defenseman.
Well, and he might. He's a little older. He was at UMass Lowell for 4 years.
College
Um,
hockey.
yeah, college. But the only thing that makes me hesitant is the guy that I would compare Christian Folin to on our back end right now is Marco Scandella. And
Really?
yeah, well, a big body, a physical guy who can also move the puck well. It's got a big shot. I don't think anyone else really compares to him that well. It makes me nervous that Scandella is the guy being dangled when I think he's probably our third best defenseman on our team.
Yeah, I would be absolutely heartbroken if Marco Scandella would be indeed dealt.
Well,
Um,
that and he's got a great hockey name too. You don't want to just trade those guys away.
Yeah, you don't just trade those guys. Those guys don't grow on trees either. Those are
Yeah.
those are special players. No, I mean Marco Scandella is just by default is the biggest defenseman the Wild have. He's got one heck of a shot, which I don't think is utilized enough, especially on the power play. We saw him a few years ago and last year get some power play time, and you know what? Last year he had didn't he have 10 goals? I mean, you
Yeah.
don't, you don't see blue liners anymore rack up a lot of, not in general they don't, but especially in this game, in today's game. I would love for him to be a little bit more offensive. And yeah, you're right. He has kind of gotten the front end of the stick the last 6 weeks, honestly, since about December. He's just kind of gotten the short end of the stick on a lot of occasions, which does confuse me too, because he's a big cat. He's got a great shot. I think he's one of the most complete two-way defensemen on our team. They just awarded him with a big extension. I think it would be pretty foolish of the Wild to let go of a guy like Marco Scandella.
Well, I think everyone's so desperate, for this something to happen. We both have stressed that it's internal, probably the changes that need to happen. But he signed at a relatively cap friendly, charge, and I think that's he's a very attractive commodity to a lot of teams who need help on the back end.
Well,
Uh,
let
but
me
but
let
but
me
I
run
don't but
compare
I don't
run
want him to go
comparisons
anywhere.
for you. Obviously, kind of a similar situation, similar, not the same, but similar situation what Travis Harmonic is in New York. I mean, he's a clearly now Travis Harmonic's asked for a trade. He wants to get out of New York. He wants to be closer to home and near Canada. Maybe even in Minnesota could be a fit, but I don't see that happening. And it's very similar to that situation in New York right now, where this guy's got a very friendly deal on a contract. He's already demonstrated he can be a two-way defenseman and a very good one for a long time. It would be interesting to see where Harmonic even goes moving forward. I mean, I don't know if you saw the E60 thing they did on him a few months ago about his dad and how much of an influence he had on his game. I mean, you don't have to you don't have to tell Liam and I about death in the family when it comes to fathers, but he very similar situations with Scandella and Harmonic.
Yeah, it is. I think they're two different players. I don't think Hammonick, sorry, is as physical, but yeah, similar guys. He's got that right shot that everyone covets, which is good. I don't want him anywhere. I'm just so I feel like I've almost got blinders on just because I don't want Marco around or Marco gone. It's got me nervous. And the Wild have too many problems right now to acquire a guy just because he's not happy in New York. I think
Right.
they should focus on other things. There's there's some guys out there. I just don't think if we're gonna steer towards the trade deadline, discussion point. Let's think who, what do we need? I would say a center. You know,
Right. Well, of course. I mean that's the biggest reason.
yeah.
Biggest
Okay.
fill the need.
Well, who is out there? I mean, Johansson's gone.
Right.
Probably the second best guy who the Wild could get, because let's be honest, Steven Stamkos is never going to put on a
No,
Minnesota
not
player.
happening.
Not that he wouldn't want to come here, but he's going to command too much money, and we got too much money tied up in other veterans. Eric Staal is probably your best guy, and Carolina's starting to heat up. So the asking price for him will probably be pretty high unless they're in the playoff picture. And then,
right.
He's not, then he's off the market. And then, who's after him? Yuri Hudler. It's so thin. You just can't make a panic move right now if you're Chuck Fletcher.
Yeah, and because of this, or because of people are, we're so desperate to find a center. I mean, you got Jarrett Stoll right now playing on the third line. I mean, and hey, I'm a huge fan of this Stoll acquisition. And he fits the Minnesota Wild hockey very well. But it kind of an interesting move to see him being on the third line on a center, kind of by default, because Minnesota has no other options after the top two, or honestly after Mikko Koivu, if you're really breaking it down. But poor Thomas Vanek and Jason Zucker are stuck with Jarrett Stoll. And I know Stoll, hey, he had a nice couple games towards the end of January. He actually scored some points. But guys like Thomas Vanek or Jason Zucker or even Nino Niederreiter, they're not going to be scoring goals if Jarrett Stoll's in the center of the ice.
No, they're not. I think Vanek's with Stoll because Stoll is kind of defensively minded. He knows that Vanek's kind of a liability when it comes to back checking. So that's probably why Yo's got him stuck with Stoll. Thinking in my head today when the lines came out from practice, Nino and Coyle are flanking Koivu. The Pominville Granlund Parisi line is for some reason still together, but
yes.
Then I started to think, you can't break them up. I mean, you can't put Vanek with Granlund and Parisi because Granlund is not going to play defense, or well, it's not that the effort isn't there; it's the ability. You can't move him up to. I mean, you could move him to the Koivu line. I mean, you put Koivu with Chuck Coyle and Vanek. I mean, that's not a bad line, but then that kind of takes away from the potency of this Stoll Zucker combination. So I don't know what you do there. I think you let it ride. I'd like to see Eric Haula maybe on that third line with Vanek and Zucker, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge factor of splitting up this Granlund, Parise, Pominville line. I mean, just tiny dudes out there on the ice, and Parise works hard. He certainly looks a lot taller when he's
hardest working guy on the ice every night.
But it's gone stale. This was a consistent line for the Wild for the better part of the last two seasons, and it hasn't produced. But you bring up an excellent point of, okay, well, who are you going to throw on there, and who's going to swap? Who are you going to swap it with? And is that line now going to suffer because you got to get these guys going? I mean, Zach Parise had 5 goals in January, 3 of them in one game, but he was kind of a little bit quiet, and I don't think it's necessarily Parise's fault he isn't scoring. And but Mikhail Granlund and Jason Pominville right now are just stuck in the cellar with a lock and a ton on a truck bed on top of the weight. I mean, they just can't seem to break out of their funk. And if you're going to split up these guys, you at least have to find sustainable suitors to make this team work.
Yeah, you do. Granlund's got 25 points. You think that he's supposed to have this potential to be a 60-point guy. I'm not sold on that. And if that's not the case, he doesn't need to be in your top line. But I feel the talent is there. It's just like you said, it's been proven that line could be effective. Jason Pominville is, having a terrible year, but I wonder how much of it is him being snake bit. Um, his shooting percentage isn't exactly up near his career average, but he could get it going. Um, hot goaltending always helps too. Dubnik and Kemper, have been fairly solid. It's a lack of scoring. So a lot of interesting things could happen, in these next 30 some odd games here. Um, I think if we miss the playoffs though, Mike Yo's probably gone. Um, and if he's gone, then I wonder who else is gone,
Oh,
player wise.
exactly. I think that's people would love it. First off, Jason Pominville, I think that's the biggest guy the Wild would like to see move on from, just because of his extreme inefficiencies this season. The fact he's literally on the books for 4 more after this. He's clearly shown his age this season. But if Mike Yeo is retained, like you were saying, I'm sorry, I don't think anyone's getting moved. I don't think it's going to be, or at least it's going to be very tough to move on from someone. You bring up an excellent point that if a new coach comes in, because we know Chuck Fletcher isn't going anywhere, if a new coach comes in, who does he want to? Who do they want to move? I think honestly, the easiest move to make is to trade Thomas Vanek. I love Vanek. I've defended him night and day, but he'd be the easiest one to move coming into it next season on his last year of his contract. And yeah, you might not get a great value out of it, but he'd clear the cap at least and save you $6 million off your books.
I don't know if I think Vanek's probably the most attractive guy to other teams. He's a streaky scorer. He's a guy who scores in bunches. Wild fans know that from his days at the U. But probably a guy like Zucker, if this season starts to go by the wayside, he's a restricted free agent at the end of the year. A lot of people were talking, all this trade deadline talk about Brodin and Dumba being dangled. Zucker, I wouldn't be surprised if he's moved, just with the lack of production. Lack of opportunity, yes, but lack of production. And not to backtrack here, but Jason Pominville's shooting percentage this year, 4.1%.
Goo!
Which is his career average is 10.8. So snake bit is probably an understatement. And I almost wonder if he could, even if he brings it up to 7%. That puts him on a nice little run towards the end of the season. What I feel like we're always talking about what is wrong. What do you think needs to happen? Like, and don't try your best not to give me a general response, because every time I'm talking to a Wild fan, it's always this, well, we need to score more. Well, yeah, we need to score more. Well, what do you think is the fix?
That is $1 million question, and I think if I was able to answer it, I would get a spot on the bench with Yo and Brunette. But the best way I think you can answer that is you have to find a way to get Mikhail Granlund going. I think that is the biggest thing. And Mikhail, I said that last week too. It's not the points I have a problem with Mikhail Granlund's game. It's not his point percentage. It's not the number of points he's missed. It's the lack of an effort and the literally liability after Mikko Koivu that someone needs to step up as a center. And if Mikhail Granlund can get going, and we have seen it, we've seen it 2 years ago. We saw it a little for an up and down portion of last season. He can play a very good both two-way hockey game when he wants to. It almost seems. I know Thomas Vanek it doesn't want to back check, and hey, that's very clear on the ice. But I think Mikhail Granlund is young enough and has somewhat shown he can be that player. It's getting Mikhail Granlund going, and that is the biggest factor. If you get Granlund going, for the love of God, I think that's just going to fix it. I really do. I don't think there's anything defensively the Wild are necessarily doing wrong right now. Dubnik's playing well, even though Marco Scandella has been kind of shelved off, like we talked about earlier in the podcast. I don't think there's anything wrong with the team defensively or from a fourth line perspective. They have to figure out a way to get Mikhail Granlund going. That would be my biggest concern going into the year. That's the biggest way to fix the Wild.
Yeah, and Mikhail Granlund, 4.6 shooting percentage this year. So they always talk about him. The wild brass and even the Minnesota media is like, we wish he'd shoot more. And yeah, I do too. I mean, he made that little move against Arizona the other night, where he kind of did a sharp little cutback and he just, kind of swatted at the puck, even though it was kind of fluttering. And it was, right into the goalie's chest for Arizona. But it was almost just like, well, who was that guy? Where did you come from? Usually I thought you were going to flutter that over the net, for a turnover for Oliver Ekman Larson to take up the other way. Like, yeah, I think Granlund might be that linchpin. It's pretty obvious now in today's NHL that you don't need a superstar to win a Stanley Cup or to go deep in the playoffs. LA did it, with their best player. Drew Doughty, yeah, probably I call him, he's a top 5 defenseman in the league, but he wasn't dominating in the playoffs. Anze Kopitar,
Kopitar. He's turning that. I mean, he was already good, but he might be even turning the page, I think, on the next echelon of elite players. I mean, he is having one of his best season to date. I mean, he has been phenomenal all year for the Kings.
Yeah, I mean, strong two-way player, but you want depth throughout your lineup. I think that's kind of why you put the Vanek on the third line, and use him, start him in the offensive zone, limit his liability, his chance to be a problem for you. You want that depth. Any coach will tell you, obviously, the goal all game is to roll all 4 lines. But you need that. You can't have a one-dimensional team where the opposing team can throw their best checkers out against your best scoring line, and then you're just shut down. You need to have that parity throughout your lineup. I think that's kind of the direction that the NHL is heading. Like I said, with the '70s line that was popular with the Kings when they won their 2 cups, and then the triplets line with Tampa Bay, Tyler Johnson, on that line. You need Granlund to get going. The young guys on our team, period. I wish anyone would get going. Obviously, I feel like I'm falling into my generalizations here that I asked you not to do. I just wish somebody would just put the team on their back, and I could see somebody doing that. I feel like Mikko Koivu, Zach Parise, they know they're not getting younger, and this window is closing. I wonder if someone's just kind of gonna say, "Hey, hop on because we're going," whether you're coming or not. So yeah, the utter lack of scoring on this team, I just wish someone would just break out. And I feel like if that happened, I feel like everyone would break it. I feel like it'd be like this magical cure-all. Like, you'd see, obviously the lack of frustration a lack of frustration on the team, is obviously great, because if Pominville's gripping his stick too tight, he's probably pissed that Granlund didn't give him a perfect pass, or that, and then Parise's upset that Pominville didn't battle hard enough in the boards. You want that chemistry to get going here, and hopefully they can do that.
Okay, so let me propose this question. You're talking about checking lines and whatnot, especially how big of a factor that can play in postseason. Let's say the Minnesota Wild get another date with the St. Louis Blues, who we will see in the regular season, obviously this weekend. Yep. Let's say we get another first round matchup with the St. Louis Blues. What pairings? Who do you throw out there as a checking line to try to slow down a Tarasenko?
Because a Tarasenko? I mean,
who would you really throw out there?
I mean, our best D line is any line that Mikko Koivu centers,
right?
But I mean, yeah, I put Charlie Coyle and Mikko Koivu together on a line, and whoever Joe Bag of Donuts could be their left wing. I don't care. That's our best defensive line. Obviously, Jarrett Stoll has that responsibility. You could even bump, a Justin Fontaine, I'm not a fan of him, but he plays defensive hockey a little, better than his offensive potential. Yeah, if it's a St. Louis Blues, Tarasenko, or it's a Chicago Blackhawks, sorry, Patrick Kane. Yeah, I want Miku Koivu on that line checking them. Absolutely. I don't think that there's even a close second. You? No? You there, man? Hello? Hello? You got me?
Oh, there we go.
That was
There we
weird.
go. There we go. I'm sorry, my mic came unplugged. I just realized it.
Oh, right on. Okay.
Oh,
Well, I
in the
guess.
middle of my rant too. Come on.
Oh, I felt like I was talking forever and I couldn't hear anything.
Well, I could see, not that we're clearly getting so in this train wreck of the last 30 seconds here. I was seeing you were texting me, and I was like, well, what the heck's he texting me for? And then all of a sudden I looked down and nothing was coming through my audio. No, my microphone got unplugged. That was, and it's in the back.
Thank goodness for editing software.
Thank goodness for editing software and older brothers, right? Because
Yeah.
I was completely oblivious until someone like you told me that I was being wrong.
Yeah. So, anyways, now that you finally
what was the last
your,
thing you heard
finally
me say?
pulled yourself together here.
Yeah, I'm a mess.
I didn't hear you say anything. I was saying the last thing any interaction, I was saying that any line with Miku Koivu on it is a line I want against another team's best players. But I don't think that there's a close second on our team.
Okay, so my point was, and that's I accept that. I accept that Mikko Koivu is clearly the best option there. But with Koivu and Coyle clicking, honestly, the only two players that are clicking so well on the other side of offensively, I mean, if we were to play the St. Louis Blues tomorrow in the playoffs in the first round, and we'll see them this Friday, but if we were to play them tomorrow night in a best of 7, I would say we're done in 5. I don't think I would think St. Louis would outmuscle us. I would think Tarasenko would again have a feast of a playoffs on us, and I don't think it'd be even close. Last year, some people were saying, well, I think St. Louis could be, they should be able to handle the Wild easier. They're a much bigger team. They should be able to throw their weight around. Well, the Wild had kind of threw it right back at them, but they also, most importantly, last season had a much better offense, and the Wild clearly don't have that right now. And
not to throw away anything you're saying, but a big reason why the Wild won that series is because they didn't allow St. Louis to dictate the style of play. They allowed St. Louis to play physical, but they weren't going to bait Minnesota into playing a physical game because they knew that's how St. Louis would win. Minnesota countered with playing a speed game, an up-tempo game, a strong defensive, play in front of their net game. And that's why we won that series. But I don't think you're wrong to say that we lose in 5. I would say we'd lose in 4. And to be honest, but the way we're playing right now, there's no team in the playoff picture that I think we could beat right now. Of course not. We're in this slump. Yeah, it's hard to tell.
How much do you think the Wild are going to have to rely on Devin Dubnyk the rest of the way? Do you think it's safe to say that Devin Dubnyk has to play, lights out or out of his mind the rest of the way? Do you think they're going to have to really piggyback on Devin Dubnyk the rest of the way?
Well, I don't know if I'll have to piggyback on him. I mean, you don't have the lack of confidence in your goaltending that we did the past couple of years. Um, so I feel like guys aren't cheating towards the back end because they're worried if they leave their goalie out to dry that we're gonna have to score 5 goals to win a game. I mean, we that Arizona game. I mean, we made Arizona look silly for the first 58 minutes of that game. Um, but
Physically, though, I mean, we still only scored what, 1 goal in 16
right, and that's what
regulation.
I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We had 40, 35, 40 shots on them. It's not like we weren't playing, up tempo hockey. We just couldn't put the puck in the net. Granted, we ran into a hot goalie, Arizona, Deming or
Whatever
Dominique or
the little 16-year-old that's saving
whatever.
their season
Yeah,
right now. Yeah.
yeah. He just won NHL Rookie of the Month for January. So we ran into a hot goalie, but we were playing. I mean, we were played a good game that game. Devin Dubnyk blew it, ironically, but he also only let in 1 goal. I
Right.
mean, there's not much you can ask for. I don't think you need to ride him. I think you need to someone like I said, someone needs to get hot. Someone. I
Yeah.
think once somebody gets on a streak, I feel like the floodgates open. This is too good of a team, too talented of a organization to one miss the playoffs and two to squeak in. We're not that team anymore. That's not our expectations. If
Absolutely.
we my last little thought on this here, if we get in as an 8th or a 7th seed and don't do well, don't play a really competitive first round, I'm disappointed.
Oh, absolutely. And you brought up if Wild don't make the playoffs, you think it's guaranteed, writing on the wall, stamped, sign, seal, deliver it that Mike Yo's gone. If the Wild get bounced in 4 games in the first round, I think it's safe to assume that Mike Yo is gone. I mean, I know
Oh,
Minnesota
yeah,
would have to still go on a
yeah,
pretty
that's
good
fair.
tear, but if they lost in 4 games or 5 games, I think the Mike Yo experiment would be done. I really do. And then we go back to the point earlier in the podcast where if a new coach comes in and what does he want to do, and Fletcher and him need to communicate with, all right, we need to move these players, or we need to obtain this type of player. We need to stand pat on this type. That's the biggest question going forward. Is if or a good thought going forward, if Minnesota doesn't make the playoffs, essentially the Wild really honestly need to have a 6-7 game series in the first round to even have a thought of Yo clinging on to his job.
Yeah, I think that's true. Also, I feel like we're getting super, down this path of, oh crap, Wild gotta really get it into gear here. I mean, and they do, sure, but like I said, this is too talented of a team to miss the playoffs. I don't think they miss the playoffs, but it's how much noise they're gonna make and when to get hot. And I'll say this: if you're gonna have a slump, I'd rather have you have one in January than in March.
Right.
So maybe we get it going here. Maybe the battles, the hard battles and shoving matches in practice, and the time off for the All-Star break is just what we needed, and we get it going. We get it in gear.
Yeah, and I know we're in ninth place right now. If the season started tomorrow, we're no longer making the playoffs. But you also have to remember, and this is just simple math, or I like to call it Declan math when I call it Husky hockey games, because it's always such great ideas. Minnesota's played just 49 games. I mean, that is tied, or that is the second fewest amount of games that they've played in the Western Conference. Chicago's played 53. St. Louis has played 53. On your left, Colorado's played 52. I mean, just by math, that they've had more opportunities to obtain points. That the Wild, I can't believe we're out of the playoff picture already. Well, yes, we've lost games, but I mean, simple math tells me the other teams have also played more games, so they've had more opportunities to move up in the standings.
Yeah, yeah. There's plenty of opportunity, especially the Pacific being so weak. And yeah, Colorado on your left. Colorado, was probably the luckiest team in the NHL 2 years ago. For getting just to get into the playoffs.
I,
The
I
fact
don't know if I'll say lucky, but I'll say overachieving. How about the overachieving
What's
hockey
really
team?
the difference in today's NHL? I mean,
Yeah.
they had a crazy high shooting percentage. Or Semyon Varlamov just bailed them out of like every other game. Yeah, that's a talented Colorado squad. I'm not knocking the players on it, but that's a team that totally overachieved. So yeah, on your left, um, I, I'm totally comfortable of eating my own words. My wife makes me do it frequently, but um, Colorado's not making the playoffs. I'm just going to say that right now. And that little shot they gave us on Twitter the other day, I thought was funny, but it's going to be funnier when they're golfing in April and we're playing playoff hockey.
Yeah, especially too when their goalie's being summoned to listen to a testimony of his, great, the great thing he tried to do to his girlfriend and whatnot. So I mean, they're already losing their starter
Yeah,
that was really been kind of their rock the last few years to a off the ice issue, and that's just recipe for disaster.
yeah,
I don't
oh
think
yeah,
I think Colorado's in a world of hurt. Hey, they have an offense that I think any team would kill to have. Obviously, they
oh
have
yeah.
so many talented players.
Matt Duchene, Nathan
I was talking
McKinnon, yeah,
to you
those
about
are
it the
great
other night.
teams.
I would do anything in the world to obtain a Matt Duchene.
Oh
A Matt
yes,
Duchene on the Minnesota Wild would. Oh my! I would. I don't care if I'd take out loans. I'd buy season tickets tomorrow if the Wild somehow were able to acquire a Matt Duchene. I mean, they play a great offensive game, but yes, they're kind of a defensive liability. And Varlamov being in trouble off the ice, I don't see any reason why they'll be in the playoff picture. I'll pick Anaheim, who was so horrible to start the year. I would say Anaheim, not better, or not by much, but a better chance of making the playoffs than Colorado.
yeah. I'd say the same thing. Anaheim's getting hot at the right time. It's all about
Yeah.
when you get hot in any sport, no matter what sport you're in. It's all about when you get hot. Um, and like I said, I'm glad that the Wild had a you know I'm not glad, but I'm hoping that the Wild got their big slump out in January and this doesn't carry on, because if they get hot now, that's great. I mean, it's momentum. It's all we got in as a lower seed last year and we beat St. Louis in 6 games.
Yeah, man. I mean, they can get hot, and you said it best. I think that this was the right time to have the slump, and yeah, even though we've had the same song and dance for 4 years in a row, it this has been the best situation it's been in. I mean, you were drowning in water, but I think the Wild are still treading. You were literally you were on your last breath the last 3 years in this
Yeah.
situation where the Wild are just okay. We're literally on our tippy toes. We're in the deep end, and we don't know how to swim yet, but we're gonna learn. So I think the Wild will get there. I agree. To kind of to wrap this one up, I think we're kind of hitting our benchmark here. But we brought up. I don't think Devin Dubnyk necessarily have to ride him. I think the best case, you let him buck as a father would tell your son. You just kind of let him ride. You let him buck. You let him play his game, and you hopefully can wake up Mikhail Granlund. And as you said, then the dominoes fall from there. Once someone gets hot, whether it's a veteran rallying the troops, whether it's just a young player taking the next step like Charlie Coyle's done this season, then the pieces will start to fall.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, to kind of wrap things up, I I don't think you need to ride Dubnik. I think someone gets it in gear. The answer is internal. I don't want to make a trade, and you know what? I'm going to make a prediction here.
All right.
Thomas Vanek finishes with 30 goals. He's
You
got
know,
14. It's not out of the question. He's got
and
14.
and unbiasedly, so all my Thomas Vanek, friends that know my love for Thomas Vanek is greater than probably his own wife's, but uh he's the kind that's his game. That he's the streaky kind of guy that happens
Yeah,
to. You know, he
I
he's
could see him
he's
being that guy. He's been the
he's the
scapegoat.
he's the cat that if when the dominoes start really falling like we've been talking about, he can't be touched. And I you know what? That's not a bad prediction. I think he'll have to, unless Jarrett Stoll elevates his game into a new level. I think that's going to be very tough for him. But I can see a guy like that taking the next step. For me, it's getting Mikhail Granlund going, because if the Wild go to the playoffs tomorrow and continue at this goal rate, but even if I know we're ending the podcast, but let's say the Wild just are winning 2-1 games, they're at 1-0, 2-1 games, barely even eclipsing 3 goals, and they're just riding Dubnyk, but they're getting 2 points a night. I still say we're swept in 5. I don't think I don't see any reason to believe that. Oh well, Devin Dubnyk had a 1.716 GAA the rest of the way, and we were 95% effective on the penalty. I don't care if we're playing St. Louis, we're playing Chicago, we're playing Dallas. They're going to score goals. We're not, and they'll have to figure out a way to wake up the offense.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I I like to think they can. I don't want to see a move made that jolts this locker room, because I feel like that's not the answer, and I feel like that could lead to a bigger problem. So yeah.
All right, well, that'll do it. I think we you know what we should try to do for the third episode, and I don't even care if it's a friend of yours. I hope it's an intelligent one, because I would only bring an intelligent one. Maybe we should try to get a guest, and he doesn't have to be a credentialed expert like myself, but I think
Not
I
to
think
toot your own horn.
yeah, but I think we should get another voice in here. The Goffs have a tendency to sometimes talk out of our butts. As much as we are intelligent, we talk out of our butts. So maybe let's get an outsider, and by outsider, not Goff blood related. Sorry, Carmelo. Sorry, Jen. Well, Jen doesn't count. Did Jen count? She's not have Goff blood, but hey, she's legally a Goff, so she counts now. So we got to get a guest on. I think maybe we'll talk about that for the next show.
Yeah, we could get that moving. Extra insight is always good. It's not as good as my insight, but whatever. It's a good idea. Yeah, great episode. Lot of good talking points. Obviously, Wild need to pull it together, and hopefully they do.
All right, man. Well, you always love to get the last word, so you send us off here.
You know what? Not hockey related. I was just I just got out of the military, and a lot of stuff going on right now. Just wanted to say, stay safe to all the men and women overseas. I got a lot of buddies who are still in. Support the troops right now.
America.
A lot of people are, saying they are, and they're really not. Kind of back it up a little bit.
It's sad.
Back it up.
It is very sad. You are right. Luckily, even though the NHL has kind of gotten a lot of wrongs from a PR standpoint recently, their Defend the Blue Line Act is awesome.
Yeah, Defend the Blue Line. Look it up. Look up Defend the Blue Line. Or even any sort of thing like that. People kind of just buy into like the Wounded Warrior program. They're kind of in a scandal. I'm going off on a political tangent. I'm going to cut myself off. Defending the Blue Line, look it up. It's great work. It's for kids whose parents are deployed or overseas. It's a really great cause. Look into it.
All right, that'll do it for the Lost in the Wild podcast for Declan Goff and my brother. This is where you say your name.
Liam.